Okay. Good morning, everyone. In the last session, we started with another statement of the second law of thermodynamics. Kelvin Planck statement was seen in the last prior to last session, and in the last session we started with the alternative statement of the second law itself, that is Clausius statement. According to Clausius, it is impossible for a device to transfer heat from low temperature to high temperature without involvement of external energy, right? We need to take assistance of uh, some alternative source to transfer heat from low temperature to high temperature. Naturally, heat can transfer from high temperature to low temperature, but when you want to have that reverse transfer from low temperature to high temperature, you need to take assistance of some external agency, right? And in case of refrigerator or heat pump, that external energy is nothing but the work required to drive the compressor. Okay, so if you not provide work as an input to the compressor, that refrigerator or heat pump will not work, and that is the Clausius statement. The difference between Kelvin Planck and Clausius is Kelvin Planck statement deals with heat engine, whereas Clausius statement deals with the refrigerator or heat pump. So whenever you are talking about Kelvin Planck statement, it is basically related to conversion of heat into work. And Clausius statement, when you are transferring heat from one body to another, and preferably that is low temperature body to high temperature body. So after Clausius statement, we proved the equivalence between those two statements, the equivalence between Kelvin Planck statement and Clausius statement that we proved. So equivalence means those two statements are dependent of each other. If you do something that violates either of the statement, means if you do something that violates the Kelvin Planck statement, the ultimate result that you will be getting is violation of Clausius statement. And if you do something that violates the Clausius statement, then you will get violation of Kelvin Planck statement. So violation of one statement leads to violation of other statement, and this dependence of those two statements on each other is called as equivalence of those two statements that we proved through those two examples. In first example, we considered a heat pump that is transferring heat from low temperature body to high temperature body, and there isn't any work supplied for that transfer of heat from low temperature to high temperature, and we know that that is violation of Clausius statement. And ultimate result, we got that those two, when we connected another heat engine working between same source and sink, then they combinedly acted as a heat pump or heat engine. What was that? Initially, we considered violation of Clausius statement. So ultimate result we are supposed to get is violation of Kelvin Planck statement. So when we combine that heat pump and heat engine, ultimate result was violation of Kelvin Planck statement, because those two were acting like a heat engine, exchanging heat with a single reservoir, that is cold reservoir, at temperature T2, and producing net work output Q1 minus Q2. So that is violation of Kelvin Planck. And alternatively, we considered violation of Kelvin Planck statement, that is there was a PMM2, that is exchanging heat with single source and producing net work output, or converting all the heat into work output with 100% efficiency. And we know that that is violation of Kelvin Planck statement. And ultimately we got the result that togetherly they were acting like a heat pump that is transferring heat from low temperature body to high temperature body without consumption of external work, and that becomes the violation of Clausius statement. So we have proved that violation of one leads to violation of other. So in exam they may ask to prove the violation of Kelvin Planck and Clausius statements. So depending upon the marks for which that question has been asked, either you can write this single part or you can write both. That is violation of Clausius leading to violation of Kelvin-Planck, and violation of Kelvin-Planck leading to violation of Clausius statement. So that need to be addressed depending upon the marks that has been assigned to that particular questions. So we compared those two statements also. Now we know that Kelvin-Planck deals with the heat engine, whereas Clausius deals with the heat pump or refrigerator. And remaining two points are not actually differences, but both are negative statements, and both are based on the experimental observations. They don't have any mathematical proof. Okay, both statements are experimental observations. Then we talked about PMM2. Now we know that, let me ask this question to somebody we already have discussed in the last session, but still I want to check whether you were a little bit attentive. Manisha, you there?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Can you tell me what is mean by PMM1 and what is mean by PMM2, or how we get that PMM1 and PMM2?
Mm,
You were there in the last session? I think no, you were not there, right? मनीषा, आवाज येतोय माझा?
Yes, sir.
लास्ट लेक्चरला होतीस का तू?
No, sir.
ओके, म्यूट कर स्वतःला. Umesh, can you differentiate between those two devices, PMM1 and PMM2? Umesh?
Yes, sir.
Yes, can you tell us what is PMM1 and PMM2?
Perpetual motion machine of first kind and perpetual motion machine of second kind.
Very good. How we get that PMM1?
PM1 is useful energy without energy sources to produce the more consume energy than consume.
Okay. And that is violation of?
Violation of first law of thermodynamics.
Very good. And what about PMM2?
Sir, ये नहीं समझ रहा.
PMM2 तर स्क्रीनवरच आहे की रे. Okay, I'll explain. So those who don't know PMM1, PMM2 yet, you are supposed to know this because we have talked about this one many times in the past, but still I'm going to talk about it again. The first law is law of conservation of energy, right? It says that energy can neither be created nor destroyed. Means we cannot create energy, we cannot destroy energy. Then what we can do with energy? We can transfer it from one form of energy to another form of energy, right? So if we construct a device that convert or that produces work output without consumption of any form of energy. So if there is a device that is producing work output continuously, but it is not taking any other form of energy. So Q is equal to 0, right? So such a device is PMM1 because this is violation of first law of thermodynamics, because what this device is doing, this device is creating energy. As it is not taking any energy as an input, still it is producing work output. It means that it has some kind of energy generation by itself, and if this device is generating energy, then that is violation of first law. So this device is called as PMM1, perpetual motion machine of first kind. So the device that violates first law of thermodynamics becomes PMM1. Now obviously PMM2 should be related to second law of thermodynamics. So The device that violates second law of thermodynamics is called as PMM2, perpetual motion machine of second kind. So what this device is doing, it is taking heat Q1 from thermal reservoir and converting all that heat into useful work. So its efficiency is 100%. And we know that you cannot convert all the heat into useful work. You need to reject some amount of heat to a low temperature sink. So this efficiency can never be 100%, that we know, right? And if this device is doing that, if this device has 100% efficiency, then obviously this is violation of second law of thermodynamics. And so this device is called as perpetual motion machine of second kind. Is that clear to everyone, or you have any query? I'm not going to explain this PMM 1 or 2 in future again. It is clear to everyone, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let me clear this annotation. How to clear everything. Okay, so after that we talked about the reversible and irreversible process. Actually, we know that what is mean by reversible process and irreversible process, and what are the causes that makes process irreversible, right? So reversible in the sense, if the process is taking place at extremely slow rate, means process is extremely slow. Each and every step of that process is in equilibrium with its surrounding, right? That is the second characteristic. And if you can stop that process at any instant and reverse back to its initial state, then that process will become reversible. Okay, so if process is extremely slow, its individual step is in equilibrium with surrounding, and you can stop that process at any instant and reverse it in, or you can reverse it to its initial state, or from where it has started, then that process is called as reversible process. And if you cannot do that, then that becomes irreversible process. So there are certain reasons that makes process irreversible. What are those reasons? We talked about those reasons in the last session. There is a friction, then unrestricted expansion, then mixing of two fluids, heat transfer across finite temperature difference, then electric resistance, inelastic deformation of solids, and chemical reactions. If either of those phenomena are involved in a process, then that process is going to be irreversible. Means if friction is there, process is irreversible, because friction is going to convert mechanical energy into thermal energy, and thermal energy you cannot get back with the help of same device. So that is going to be loss of energy, and if some energy is going out of the system that you cannot get back, then that process cannot be reversed. Similarly, if there is unrestricted expansion or mixing of two fluids or heat transfer through a finite temperature difference. We took example of this can that was at a 5 degrees Celsius initially, and that you kept in open atmosphere which is at 20 degrees Celsius. Then after certain period of time, that can is going to attain the temperature that is equivalent to temperature of atmosphere, that is 20 degrees Celsius. And once it has attained that atmospheric temperature, you cannot get back the 5 degrees Celsius temperature again by keeping it in open atmosphere. You can get that by keeping in freezer again. But if you keep it in open atmosphere, or its place where it has reached its temperature to atmospheric temperature, then you cannot get that 5 degrees Celsius by itself, right? So that becomes irreversible process. So such a reasons are there that makes process irreversible. Now we are going to talk about Carnot cycle. Today we are going to begin with the Carnot cycle. So before beginning with the Carnot cycle, let me tell you that Carnot cycle is one of the ideal cycle. Ideal cycle, it is a reversible cycle, and it has certain characteristics that makes process impossible. Means till today you won't find any live example working on this Carnot cycle. Okay, so if somebody asks you to tell an example of any device that works on Carnot cycle, the answer is no. There isn't any device that works on the Carnot cycle. Okay, because it is ideal cycle, it is hypothetical cycle or theoretical cycle. It has certain limitations that cannot overcome by any means, so it doesn't have any example till today. So there are certain assumptions related to Carnot cycle. The assumptions are, let me get the pen. The first one is piston moving in the cylinder does not produce any friction. Now, before explaining those assumptions, let me draw something. So actually, this is related to piston cylinder arrangement. So this is cylinder and there is piston over here. This piston is going to have a reciprocating motion inside the cylinder. Now, initially, this piston will be somewhere here. Cycle will begin from here. The piston will start moving vertically down. This is inlet valve and this is outlet valve. So when piston moves from, this is called as TDC, top dead center. This is called as BDC, that is bottom dead center. So when initially piston will be at this position, it will start moving vertically down. During that downward movement, this inlet valve will be open. So fresh fluid will enter the system. The piston will move to this BDC, that is another extreme end. Once that all the required fluid has entered this chamber, now this inlet valve will be closed and outlet valve is still closed. It has not opened yet. Now piston will start moving from this BDC to TDC. So as area keeps on decreasing, amount of fluid is same. So it will start compressing the fluid. And because of compression, we know that its temperature is going to increase. So before that piston reaches to this TDC, that is another end, when it reaches somewhere here, enough pressure will be developed over here that causes some temperature rise, and at that time ignition of this working fluid will take place because of the increased temperature, either by increased temperature or in case of some engines there will be a spark plug to ignite that mixture, and means piston has reached somewhere here, it hasn't reached to this top dead center 8. So before that ignition occurs, the mixture get burned. Because of that one, some gases will be generated after the combustion, and this exhaust or outlet will be open. So that mixture will go out of the system, and exactly at the same time, the piston will reach to this top dead center, and because of combustion there will be like a tremendous force exerted on this piston that pushes the piston in downward direction. So that way the next cycle will begin. Means initially piston was at top dead center and it started moving vertically down. That was the initial condition, right? So at the end of that compression stroke, when piston has reached this top dead center, the mixture over here will burn. Because of burning of that fuel, there will be a kind of a small blast would be there that will push this piston vertically downward and another cycle will begin. So that is the exact cycle taking place inside the Carnot cycle. Okay, now we are going to look at those assumptions and we are going to compare those assumptions with the piston cylinder arrangement. So the first assumption is the piston moving inside the cylinder does not produce any friction. Means there is a piston, sorry, there is cylinder, there is piston, and this piston is going to slide inside the cylinder. So these walls of the piston are going to be in contact with the walls of this cylinder, and this contact is considered as frictionless, right? And we know that that is impossible, but we have considered that this contact is going to be frictionless. We can reduce that friction by applying lubricants and all, but we cannot make that friction zero. But here what we have assumed that friction is zero. So that is first assumption. Then the cylinder head is arranged in such a way that it can be a perfect heat conductor as well as heat insulator. So this cylinder head, this top portion of this cylinder is going to act as perfect heat conductor at one instant and going to act as perfect heat insulator on the another instant. Means there is a same material, that same material is expected to act as a heat conductor as well as heat insulator, and we know that that is not possible. Means this is pen and it has got a material to provide insulation to the heat, right? So in that case, if this material is insulator of heat, on the another instant, I am expecting that this material should act as perfect conductor of heat. There are certain materials which are perfect conductor of the heat, but we cannot make them insulating, right? And if there are certain materials like ceramic and all, that is insulator of the heat, but that cannot made conductor of heat on the another instant, right? So that is impossible, and that is the another assumption. The assumption is cylinder head is going to be act as a perfect heat conductor as well as perfect heat insulator. Means for some part of the cycle it will act as a conductor, and for some part of the cycle it will act as a insulator, and that is another assumption, and which is again impossible. The walls of cylinder and piston are considered as perfect insulator of the heat. So these walls of the cylinder as well as these pistons are considered to be perfect insulator of the heat. That we can achieve, that would not be a big issue, because you can coat these materials with ceramic layers and all, and that way you can make them insulators of the heat. Next assumption is heat transfer does not affect temperature of source or sink. That we know, right? If we are considering a thermal reservoir, then thermal reservoir is a device or a body that has got infinite or a large amount of heat capacity. Not infinite, it has got large amount of heat capacity, and if you add heat to that body or if you take out heat from that body, its temperature will remain constant. That we know, right? That is the characteristic of a thermal reservoir. So heat transfer does not affect temperature of source or sink. So that is also fine. The compression and expansion are reversible. Compressions in the sense, when this piston moves vertically upward, the area over here will keep on reducing, whereas the amount of fluid will be going to remain same. So that will be compression stroke. And when piston moves from this top dead center to bottom dead center, area inside the cylinder will keep on increasing, and that will be expansion. So that compression and expansion are considered to be reversible. And last assumption is the working fluid is a perfect gas, and the perfect gas that has got constant. So these are the assumptions of the Carnot cycle. Somebody has unmuted. If you have any query, you can ask or mute yourself. Okay. So this is actual Carnot cycle. So whatever assumptions we saw, do you have any query, any doubt related to those assumptions? If you have any doubt, any query, you can ask, or else I'll go to the actual Carnot cycle. Any doubt, any query in the assumptions?
No, sir.
Okay, I'll take that as no, and we'll begin with the Carnot cycle. So Carnot cycle is, let me slide this one. Okay, it is combination of 4 stages: stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. If you look at this PV diagram, pressure on y-axis and V on x-axis, that is volume. So here the process begin over here. This is point number 1. So from 1 to 2 is the one stage, 2 to 3 second stage, 3 to 4 third, and 4 to 1 fourth stage. So this stage 1, that is 1 to 2, is a reversible isothermal expansion. 2 to 3 is again expansion, because you can see pressure along this axis, volume along this axis. So 1 to 2, pressure is going to reduce, whereas volume is going to increase. From 2 to 3 also, pressure is going to further reduce and volume is going to further increase. So 1 to 2 and 2 to 3 is expansion itself, but 1 to 2 is isothermal expansion and 2 to 3 is adiabatic expansion. Similarly, 3 to 4 and 4 to 1 both are compression stages. Out of those two, 3 to 4 is isothermal compression and 4 to 1 is adiabatic compression. So Carnot cycle has got 4 stages. Out of those 4, 2 are isothermal processes and 2 are adiabatic processes. So there are 2 isothermal and adiabatic processes. Out of those 2, isothermal expansion is there, isothermal compression is there. Similarly, adiabatic expansion is there and adiabatic compression is there. So those 4 stages are there in Carnot cycle. Now let's see what exactly happens during those 4 stages. Now while explaining assumptions, I draw this piston cylinder arrangement and I talk a little bit about the working cycle. Like for compression, initially the piston will be at this position, it will move vertically down. For that vertically downward movement, inlet valve will be open, the working fluid will enter inside the chamber. When piston reaches this position, this valve will be closed, this valve will be closed, the piston will start moving vertically upward, so the fluid will get compressed. And when piston reaches somewhere here, the compressed fluid will be burned through spark or the temperature generated itself. And once that burning process has occurred, next stroke is expansion. So the piston will again move vertically downward, the exhaust valve will be open and gases will go out of the system, fresh air, fresh fluid will enter the system, and then cycle will continue for the next cycle, or the process will continue for the next cycle. So That arrangement has been shown over here. So this is piston cylinder arrangement. This is cylinder. This is piston. This is initial position. So you can see that the piston is close to the head of the cylinder. Now it will start moving away from the head. So area will increase, fluid will enter into the system. Now, once it has reached to this extreme end, now it will start moving in reverse direction. So now it will start compressing the working fluid, and at the end of the compression, the fluid will burn, expansion will occur, this piston will start moving away from the this end, that is this stage will start again, and when this starts moving away from this top dead center, the inlet valve will open, so fresh fluid will start entering the chamber, and that fresh fluid will start pushing the exhaust gases also out of the system, because that fresh fluid will start occupying the space that was already occupied by the gases after the combustion. So that way another cycle will start. So now during stage 1, that is 1 to 2, on PV diagram you can see that temperature is constant, that is TH. TH stands for T higher, or QH stands for Q higher, or this TH and QH also can be renamed as, this one is T1 and this one is Q1, right? So T1 and TH is nothing but the temperature at which heat is entering the system, or Q1 and QH is amount of heat accepted from the high temperature reservoir. So during the stage 1 to 2, that is isothermal expansion, we know that isothermal means when temperature of the process is, or temperature during the process is held constant. Constant temperature is nothing but isothermal. So that constant temperature is TH and process is 1 to 2. So during that stage 1, a hot energy source is applied. Heat Q1 enters the system. Heat Q1 enters the system at temperature T1. So here you can see that during stage 1 to 2, there is a hot source applied over here. So that hot source means the energy enters the system and piston moves away from the TDC. That is stage 1 to 2. Now 2 to 3 is also expansion, but that is adiabatic. So adiabatic in the sense Q is equal to 0. So when during the process there isn't any heat interaction, heat is not entering the system, heat is not leaving the system. So the second stage is adiabatic expansion. So adiabatic process in the sense when heat interaction is 0. So during stage 2 to 3, that is adiabatic expansion, so there will not be any heat interaction between the system and surrounding, and the fluid will expand from 2 to 3. Okay, so there will not be heat interaction. So the source that was applied over here during the stage 1, that source is not there. Okay, so source is not there and fluid has expanded from this position to this position. So piston has shifted from this position to this position, and source is not there. So source is not there means heat is not being added to the system, and we already have assumed that the cylinder walls, piston and this cylinder head are going to act as a thermally insulating. So heat transfer 0 and expansion from 2 to 3. Now for 3 to 4, that is compression stage. So again, there will be a source, but this time instead of heat entering the system, this is sink. This was source and this is sink. So now it will take heat out of the system. So the sink will absorb heat from this piston cylinder arrangement. So heat will go out of the system, but at constant temperature because process is isothermal. So during 3 to 4, the temperature TL will remain constant. System will reject heat QL. So QL, or this can be also called as Q2, and this TL can be called as T2. So during process 3 to 4, Q2 amount of heat being going out of the system at temperature T2. So till this 4, sink will be there. Now from 4 to 1, that is also compression, but now that is adiabatic compression. So as it is adiabatic, this sink is removed from this last stage. So sink is not there. So the walls, head and piston all will act as the insulator, and the piston will move from this position to this position. So that is compression, and heat interaction is not there. So that is adiabatic compression. Okay. So there are 4 stages. First one, isothermal heat addition as well as expansion. Then adiabatic expansion, 3 to 4, isothermal compression at constant temperature, and adiabatic compression where temperature changes from T2 to T1. Temperature will change for process 4 to 1. For 4, temperature will be T2 or TL, whereas for 1, temperature will be TH or T1. But during process 1 to 2 and 3 to 4, temperature is going to remain constant at TH, TL or T1 and T2. So these are the 4 stages of the Carnot cycle. Now let's write relations for assessing the performance of the process. So first relation is work produced by the or work produced during the cycle. Now we know this relation, right? The work produced by this during the cycle is nothing but the difference between Q1 and Q2. Q1 is amount of heat entering the system or amount of heat accepted from high temperature reservoir or source, and Q2 is heat going out of the system, or Q2 is heat rejected by the system to a sink at temperature T2. That is low temperature reservoir, and that is sink. So difference between this Q1 and Q2 will be equivalent to work produced during the cycle. And another relation is thermal efficiency, and efficiency is nothing but output by input. So now in case of Carnot cycle, output is work produced during the cycle and input is amount of heat supplied to the cycle. So work produced, we already have derived relation Q1 minus Q2, and we know that heat supplied is QH or Q1. In relations, we have used Q1, Q2, T1, T2, not QH, TH and QL, TL. So Q1, T1 is the heat entering at a temperature T1, and Q2 to T2, Q2 is heat leaving system at temperature T2. So Q1 minus Q2 work produced divided by Q1 heat supplied, and when you divide numerator individually by Q1, Q1 by Q1 1 minus Q2 by Q1. And we know that this Q1, Q2 can be replaced by T1, T2 because Q2 is heat proportional to temperature T2, whereas Q1 is heat exchange proportional to temperature T1. So this Q2, Q2, Q1 can be replaced by T2, T1. So efficiency relation could be 1 minus Q2 by Q1 or 1 minus T2 by T1. But in case of work, relation has to be Q1 minus Q2. Here we cannot use T1 minus T2, okay? That has to be Q1 minus Q2 only. So these are the important relations for Carnot cycle. We are going to solve numericals, and while solving numericals, those two relations are going to be useful. So if you have any query, any doubt in those relations or in whole cycle, you can unmute and ask, or even you can put it in a chat window so I can answer that query. I'll wait for a few seconds to receive your queries and then I'll proceed to the next part. I'll wait for a few seconds over here. You can ask your questions. Srikar, any query? Srikar, Samadhan, any queries there?
No, sir. No. Hello.
Any query?
Hello.
Yes.
No, sir.
Okay. I'll proceed to the next part. So, while beginning of the Carnot cycle, I said that Carnot cycle is a hypothetical cycle. Hypothetical in the sense theoretical or imaginary cycle. So why I am saying that it is hypothetical or imaginary? Because it doesn't have any real life application. So while talking about the assumptions made in the Carnot cycle, you might have got idea why this cycle doesn't have any applications. But now we are going to discuss that in detail. Why Carnot cycle don't have any real life applications. So the first reason is it is impossible to have frictionless process, because as a part of that cycle itself there is a piston cylinder arrangement, and that piston is supposed to have reciprocating motion inside that cylinder. And when two parts are going to slide against each other, we know that we cannot get perfectly smooth surface. When you observe even a mirror surface object under a microscope, you will find some irregularities on that surface. Means you cannot produce perfectly smooth surface, and if you don't get perfectly smooth surface, then when two surfaces rub or slide against each other, some kind of friction is going to be there. But here we have assumed that frictionless surfaces are there and which cannot attain in real life. So that is one of the reason. Okay. Second reason is it is impossible to transfer heat without temperature potential. We know that when you want to transfer heat from one body to another, there has to be temperature difference. And if that temperature difference is not there, then that heat transfer will not occur, right? But we are assuming or we are considering this happening in case of that piston cylinder arrangement, when temperature is being held constant and heat is being exchanged with the surrounding, and that is the limitation. The next one is, now that is quite interesting one. Let me get back to this piston cylinder arrangement so I can explain that third limitation. Okay, so during stage 1, you can see there is a source applied. This red color is nothing but the heat source. So when heat source is applied, it is expected that this cylinder head should act as a thermally conducting material that will allow heat entering the system, right? Whereas in second stage, when there is a adiabatic process, the piston is going to move either in this direction or over here in this direction by expansion of fluid or compression of fluid. But in both cases, this head is expected to act as a thermally insulating material. So same part of the cylinder, at one instant we are expecting it to act as a conductor of heat, and in second instance we are expecting that it should act as an insulator of the heat, and that is not possible. Okay. Additionally, now let me use this PV diagram for that another reason. So this part you get that same part is expected to act as conductor as well as insulator, and that is impossible. Additionally, during process 1 to 2, 1 to 2 is isothermal expansion, 2 to 3 is adiabatic expansion, or 1 to 3 is expansion and 3 to 1 is compression, right? But 1 to 3 has intermediate stage 2, and that makes 1 to 2 isothermal process and 2 to 3 as a adiabatic process. Now, during this expansion 1 to 2 and 2 to 3, during 1 to 2, we are assuming that temperature remains constant, and during 2 to 3, temperature changes from T higher to T lower, but in that case heat transfer is equal to 0, because that is adiabatic process, right? So now, to have this isothermal process, the process should proceed extremely slow. Means the speed of process has to be extremely slow, then only you can achieve this isothermal process, that is from 1 to 2. And 2 to 3, there is a temperature drop, but there isn't any transfer of heat out of the system or into the system, and that can achieve when process is extremely fast. You got that? When we want to have isothermal process, means if you want to maintain constant temperature during the process, then process has to be extremely slow. So 1 to 2, piston should move extremely slow. If I compare this 1 to 2 and 2 to 3 with piston cylinder arrangement over here, then suppose this is initial stage of the piston and suppose this is final stage of the piston, means at the end of expansion stroke piston is expected to reach over here. So from here to here, this is stage 1 and this is stage 3, and in between there is stage 2 when piston is somewhere here. Okay, so now from 1 to 2, piston is expected to move extremely slow, whereas 2 to 3, piston is expected to move extremely fast, because during 1 to 2, temperature should remain constant, and we know that when expansion is there, temperature is going to drop, and in that case there should be interaction between system and surrounding to maintain that constant temperature. And if you want to have that heat transfer to maintain the constant temperature, the process should provide enough time for that heat transfer. And to provide that enough time, the process should occur extremely slow. And that 1 to 2 is nothing but this motion 1 to 2. So for this 1 to 2, piston should move extremely slow, and 2 to 3, piston should move extremely fast. Now, if piston starting motion from here and going to reach over here, how can we make that piston move extremely slow for part of the movement and extremely fast for remaining part of the movement, right? And that is difficult. Means we want to move that piston very slowly for some part, and then sudden movement should be there, and that is impossible to have. and same thing will be there for compression also. 3 to 4 isothermal compression. So temperature should remain constant, process should move or process should occur extremely slowly, whereas 4 to 1 compression is there but adiabatic, so heat transfer should be 0, and so process should occur extremely fast. So while it is returning from this BDC to TDC, from here to somewhere here, it should move extremely slowly, and from here to here, it should move extremely fast. And if you compare this one with this one, this same movement during piston moving towards right, that was expected to be extremely slow, and when piston moving towards left, same part is expected to be extremely fast, because here we consider it to be extremely slow, and here we are considering same portion extremely fast. Even when this is to be a slow, this is to be slow, then we can do something, right? But same part at one instant has to be quick movement, and during the same portion of the piston movement at another instant it has to be moved extremely fast, and that is impossible to achieve. And because of all those limitations, we don't have any real life example of the Carnot cycle. So this is quite interesting one. This is quite important one also. So if you have any query, any doubt in this part that we have just discussed, you can unmute and ask. I'll take a break for a while. You can ask your questions.
So repeat the last point.
Pratik, which part I need to repeat?
Sir, आत्ताचा last isothermal compression.
Okay, wait a minute. Let me erase all the ink over here. Okay. So you are talking about second part, right? This one.
Yes, sir.
3 to 1. Okay, just like 1 to 2, or during 1 to 2 and 2 to 3, piston is expected to move extremely slowly, because during 1 to 2 and 3 to 4, temperature is constant. Here TH is there, but that is constant, and here TL is there, but that is also constant. So during 1 to 2 and 3 to 4, heat should either enter the system or heat should go out of the system. But there has to be heat interaction between system and surrounding. And to provide that heat interaction, we need to move piston extremely slowly. So during 1 to 2 and 3 to 4, piston will move extremely slowly, whereas 2 to 3 and 4 to 1, the heat transfer is 0, because those two are adiabatic processes. This is adiabatic expansion, this is adiabatic compression. So when you want to have change in temperature, when you increase the pressure, temperature will increase. When you decrease the pressure, temperature will decrease. So you want to that increase in pressure and decrease in pressure, so that you can have that change in temperature from T higher to T lower and T lower to T higher. But during that temperature change, you want to achieve this heat transfer should be 0, and that you can achieve only when that process takes place within an instant. Means if that process is taking place very quickly, it will not allow any heat interaction between system and surrounding, but still that expansion or compression will be there. So you will have that change in temperature or increase or decrease in temperature. So now during 1 to 2, this is 1 to 3, and this is 3, and this is 1 again. This is piston moving in this direction. Over here piston is moving in this direction. This is expansion, this is compression. Now this is 1 to 3 and in between 2 is there. Similarly, this is 1 to 3 and in between 2 is there. Now for expansion, 1 to 2 is isothermal process and it should be extremely slow. Whereas during compression, 1 to 2 is adiabatic process and that has to be extremely fast. Means during same portion of the piston cylinder movement or movement of the piston, at one instant it is expected to move extremely slowly and on the another instant it is expected to move extremely fast. And same thing is there for 2 to 3 also. During 2 to 3, during expansion, this is adiabatic, so this has to be extremely fast without allowing any heat transfer. Whereas in case of compression, this is isothermal process, so heat interaction should be there, and to have that heat interaction, it should move extremely slowly. Means during same portion, at one instant, piston should move extremely fast, and at the another instant, it should move extremely slowly. And to have that combined or alternative motion in the same piston cylinder arrangement is impossible, and because of that one, we cannot develop a real life example based on Carnot cycle. Is that fine, Pratik, now, or
Yes, sir.
that is fine, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, so how much time is there? Okay, let's start with this one. Let's see how long we can take this. Okay, so next part is now Carnot theorem. Now, I have observed this one while assessing that university question papers. Many times when they ask to explain Carnot cycle, people write this Carnot theorem, and when they ask to write Carnot theorem, they write Carnot cycle. So you need to look at that question very carefully, whether you have been asked to write on Carnot cycle or Carnot theorem, and accordingly you need to answer that question. Okay, so you shouldn't get confused between Carnot cycle and Carnot theorem. If Carnot cycle is there, you need to draw this sketch and explain this process. And when Carnot theorem is there, now that is something different. So what Carnot theorem is there, or what Carnot theorem is, that we'll discuss over here. So according to Carnot theorem, let me draw something over here so that you can have some better understanding. So there is a source at temperature T1 and there is sink at temperature T2. So this is source T1, a sink T2, and T1 is greater than T2. That is but obvious, right? If source is there, then T1 has to be greater than T2. So now, if there is one engine, suppose this is E1, there is another engine E2, and there is one more engine E3. So this is taking heat Q1, or let's call it Q E11. This is Q E21. This is Q1. Sorry, not Q1. QE31. QE3 because this is engine 3, and heat 1 because that is entering the system. And similarly, E12, this is Q, E22, and this is Q, E3, 2. Q, E3, engine 3, and 2 is the heat going out of the system. Now, suppose this is producing WE1, this is producing WE2, and this is producing WE3. Okay. So now we know that if QE1 is the heat interaction with source at temperature T1, E21 is heat interaction with the same source at same temperature. QE31 is also interaction with same source at same temperature. Then this QE1 is equal to QE21 is equal to QE31, because all these are the interaction with same source which has got constant temperature. Similarly, this QE12, QE22, QE32, all these are the interaction or amount of heat rejected to a sink at temperature T2. As sink is same, temperature is constant, these three quantities are also going to remain same. And if heat entering is same, heat leaving is same, this work produced by engine 1, work produced by engine 2, and work produced by engine 3, all are going to remain same. So can I say that efficiency of engine 1 is equal to efficiency of engine 2 is equal to efficiency of engine 3? Can I say that, Pradeep? Pratik isn't there. Okay, Umesh, can I say that? Umesh, can I say that efficiency of all the engines is going to same? Okay, who else is there? Pradeep. Pradeep, you there? Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Same as.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So all the efficiencies are going to be remain same, right? Now, what Carnot theorem says that suppose this engine E1 is regular engine, this engine E2 is also regular engine, but this engine 3 is a reversible engine. You got the difference? Engine 1 and 2 are normal engines, whereas third one is reversible engine. Then, according to Carnot theorem, even when this engine 1, 2 and 3 are acting between same source and same sink, this engine 3 will have more efficiency compared to engine 1 and 2. Why? Because this third engine is a reversible one. You got the Carnot theorem? According to Carnot theorem, it states that of all engines operating between given constant temperature source and given constant temperature sink, none has higher efficiency than reversible engine. So as we are considering that engine 3 is reversible engine, then it has got more efficiency compared to engine 1 and engine 2. So that is Carnot theorem. Now there are, let me clear this one. There are two engines, HEA and HEB. So these two engines are there interacting between source at temperature T1 and sink at temperature T2. It is taking heat Q1A producing work WA and rejecting heat Q2A. HEB is going to take heat Q1B, produce work WB and reject heat Q2B, right? Now out of this HEA and HEB, this HEB is a reversible engine. Okay. Now if I say that this is reversible engine, then the efficiency of engine B must be greater than efficiency of A, right? This is from the Carnot theorem. Because HEB is a reversible engine, then efficiency of HEB must be more than efficiency of engine A. This is what we need to, or this is going to be there according to Carnot theorem. But now to prove this one, what we are going to assume? We are going to assume that efficiency of engine A is greater than efficiency of engine B. Means we are going to assume reverse to the Carnot theorem. So according to Carnot theorem, this NB should be greater than NA, but we are assuming that NA is greater than NB. Okay, this is what we have assumed. Now NA or efficiency is equal to W by Q. W by Q1, right? That is a regular relation. So for engine A, efficiency will be work is WA, heat supplied is Q1A. So WA by Q1A, and NB is WB by Q1B. So WB by Q1B. But now we know that this Q1A and Q1B are the heat interactions with same source at constant temperature T1. So we know that this Q1A is equal to Q1B, and let's replace that Q1A and Q1B by Q1 because those two are same. So if this Q1A and Q1B is replaced by Q1, I can simply eliminate them. So I will get relation WA is greater than WB. Is that fine to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now, in next stage, just remember this one, WA is greater than WB. Now what we are going to do, as we know that this HEB is reversible engine, now we are going to reverse this engine. Okay. So when we reverse this engine, this Q1B, Q2B and W, their magnitudes will remain same, but their directions will be reversed because now we have reversed the heat engine. So this Q1B, instead of heat accepted from source, now this will be heat supplied to the source. Similarly, Q2B will be heat accepted from the source, and this WB, instead of work produced by the heat engine, now this will become work consumed by the heat engine, because now it is transferring heat from low temperature to high temperature. It need to be work consuming device now, right? And when you reverse that engine, all the directions will be reversed. Okay, so I have drawn this one in the next sketch over here. So here we have reversed this second engine, and because of that one, the direction of Q2B, Q1B has altered, and instead of work producing device, now this one has become work consuming device. The work is now input to the system. Okay. Now, this device has become work consuming device. We need to provide WB work input to the system, right? And this is a regular heat engine HEA that is producing work A. So let's provide work produced by the heat engine A to reversed heat engine B, because it is still work producing device, whereas this has become work consuming device. So let's provide work produced by this one to HEB. But here we have proved that work produced by A is greater than work produced by B. So if I connect output of this heat engine A to reverse heat engine B, the requirement of this heat engine B is less than what is produced by heat engine A. So there will be some extra work available. So if I connect output of this heat engine A to heat engine B, WA is produced by A, WB is required to B, and as WA is greater than WB, there will be some extra work available, and that is going to be WA minus WB. Is that fine?
सर ते वर्क रिजेक्टेड आहे का?
Heat engine A is normal heat engine that we have not reversed, so it will accept heat from source Q1A, produce work WA and reject heat Q2. प्रतीक 1-2 मिनिट वाट पाहू, काही जर आले तर, नाहीतर मग एक्सप्लेन करू आपण.
यस सर.
ओके, 4-5 जण आहेत. प्रतीक, आपण काय केलं, heat engine A is still a regular engine, so that is work producing device. WA is work. Can I change the color? Okay, so it is still work producing device. So WA is output, but now HEB is reversed one. So instead of work producing device, now it has become work consuming device. So now work is need to be input to the system, and out of those two, one is work producing, another is work consuming. So what we are doing, we are providing work produced by A to B, right? But this WA is greater than WB, that we are proved over here, right? So even when WA is given to the engine B, there will be some extra work available, and that available work will be difference between WA and WB. So there will be net work output WA minus WB. Is that fine now, Pradeep?
Yes sir.
Okay, so now what we are going to do, we already have considered that, or we already know that this Q1A and Q1B is same, because those two are the interaction with the same source, and those two we have replaced by Q1. So when we reverse this heat engine B, what here was happening? Initially, this was heat being taken from the source. This one was also heat taken from the source. But on reversal, now this is heat added to the source, and this is heat extracted from the source. So here, the amount of heat rejected by heat engine to a source is exactly same that of amount of heat extracted by heat engine. That is correct, Pradeep?
Yes sir.
So now what we are going to do, as the amount of heat rejected by this one and amount of heat accepted by this one is same, we will remove this source and will connect those two together. Means the amount of heat rejected by reverse heat engine will be now fed to heat engine A. because those quantities were same, and that's what we did over here. The heat rejected by reverse heat engine A is directly fed to heat engine A because those quantities were same. Now, if you look at this arrangement, this heat engine A and reversed heat engine B, they together they are producing net work output WA minus WB, whereas they are interacting with single thermal reservoir because the another reservoir is not there that we have eliminated. So that together what they are doing, they are taking heat from the same source, they are rejecting heat to the same source and still producing net work output, and that is violation of.
Kelvin Planck statement.
Very good. That is very that is violation of Kelvin Planck statement. And if you are violating Kelvin Planck statement, then that device is not possible. So initially, what we considered that efficiency of A is greater than efficiency of B, right? That we considered over here. That consideration is wrong. So what is correct? Efficiency of B is either greater or equal to efficiency of A. Right? So we have proved that if engine B is reversible engine and A is normal engine acting between same source and sink, then efficiency of reversible engine is always greater than efficiency of normal engine. So this is Carnot theorem, and if you ask to write Carnot cycle, you need to talk about this one. If you are asked to write about Carnot theorem, you need to prove this one. Okay, is that fine, Pratik?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now there is corollary to Carnot theorem also. Corollary says that the efficiency of all the reversible heat engines operating between same temperature levels is same. So what corollary says? If there are engines 1, 2, 3 or whatever be the engines are there, and if all the engines are reversible engines, then their efficiency is going to be same. The efficiency of this one, efficiency of this one, efficiency of this one is going to be same, and this is corollary. Now I haven't proved this one over here, but you can prove this one easily. For that one, what you need to do, you will consider source and sink. You will consider two engines, A and B, both reversible engines, heat interactions, and work produced. And according to corollary of Carnot theorem, efficiency of A must be equal to efficiency of B, right? This is what we need to prove. But initially, what you can consider, either efficiency of A is greater than efficiency of B, or efficiency of A is less than efficiency of B, and you can prove in the similar manner. You need to follow same scenario, that reverse one engine, then connect that with the another or heat rejected to heat accepted, and then a violation of either Kelvin Planck or Clausius statement, and ultimately you can say that the consideration that efficiency of A is greater than efficiency of B, or efficiency of A is less than efficiency of B is wrong. So efficiency of all the reversible engines acting in between same source and sink is always same. Okay, you can do that easily. If you still find difficult, you can discuss that one in upcoming sessions. So we are going to stop over here. There is 1 point thermodynamic temperature scale, and then we'll begin with the numericals. So I will stop the session over here. कोणाला काही अडचण, कोणाला काही विचारायचंय असेल तर विचारू शकताय, or else I'll end the meeting.